All right, well, thank you for being here. My name is Teddy Kimball. I live in Pine Island with my wife and 2 young kids. And I'm challenging Steve Jacob in the Republican primary for state Senate on August 11th. So I'm running against him because I think that his overall set of values, approach, and vision for our state don't really represent me well, and I don't think they represent the principles of the founding Republican Party. So I'm challenging him with a good faith platform of bottom-up, community-driven policies without trying to push social issues on you and your family. And so I'm asking for your vote on August 11th to try and put forward a new vision for our state. So I'm here as a part of 5 campaign events across our district. I started in Pine Island with a good faith discussion of data centers and how we can protect our communities from their harm with a 3-point plan of capping their special data center sales tax exclusion at $10 million, including C-weighted and Z-weighted averages into our sound laws that actually will capture that low-frequency hum and vibration that harms our households and livestock, and requiring a certificate of need so they can't freely construct diesel backup generators in our backyards. Then I went to Plainview, where we broke down fraud structurally and showed that if you eliminate the misaligned incentives, we can end the problem altogether. And I specifically made the call to action to end a multitude of troublesome childcare and daycare programs across the state, and to redirect those funds into our existing school districts through universal childcare, where we already have local oversight and management, and where our working families need the care the most, right there in our communities. On Saturday, I was in Cannon Falls making the progressive case to end income taxes and inheritance taxes by looking at 3 phases we've had so far in Minnesota tax policy and identifying the first one as being an exclusive wealth tax on our state, and how if we did that on the top 10% of our income or of our wealth earners, we could eliminate the income and inheritance tax on almost all Minnesotans and take a burden off our working class families, small business owners, retirees on Social Security, and our small family farms trying to pass down their land to the next generation. On Wednesday, I went to Wabasha to make the agrarian case to legalize small farms across the state. And so I specifically believe that if you have 10 acres of agricultural land, you should be allowed to build a house on it and start a small farm. And I also think that these properties, these farmsteads, should be exempt from the rigorous restrictions of the building code to allow a new generation of affordable and sustainable housing experimentation. And now I'm here today to talk about the 2-party system and how our election processes and laws forced it upon us and what we can do to kind of break free. So first of all, the important thing to know about our election system is we're going to have both natural structural problems that emerge from our election process that make it difficult for third parties. But we're also going to have artificial constraints that our laws put on top of it that make it more difficult. So I want to start by talking about those artificial constraints and do so with an example of how do you run for office and how do you get on the ballot in Minnesota. So Minnesota law specifies a 2-week period at the end of May. It's the filing period where you can become a candidate for office. Now within that 2-week period, all you need to do is go down to your county office, fill out a 1-page form, including your name, your address, check a few boxes that say that you're an eligible voter and eligible to be a candidate. You then need to write what is your party or cause that you're running for and give them $100. Now, once you've done that, you're automatically on the ballot in November. Unless, of course, there's more than one person in your race that puts the same party or cause. Now we're going to have a primary election. So that's what's happening with me. Both Steve Jacob and I said we are running for state senate here in District 20. We both put down Republican Party as our principal party or cause. And so we're going to be competing against each other on this Tuesday, August 11th, in the primary. And one of us, regardless if there's 2 people or 10 people running, one person from each party will go on to the general election. So it seems pretty straightforward. The question is, can you put anything down for issue or cause? And you can, however, Minnesota state law is also going to define what's called a major political party. And right now, there are only 2 parties that qualify to be a major political party, and I'm sure you can guess which 2. It's going to be the Republicans and the Democrat Farmer Labor Party here in Minnesota. So as long as you choose Republicans or Democrats, you get to sign up, sign your name, put $100 in, and you're on the ballot. But if you want to run as an independent, if you want to run as a libertarian, an agrarian, a Green Party candidate, or any other cause or principle, you have an additional requirement. You're going to have to now go in that 2-week period and find 500 people within your district that are eligible voters, and you're going to need to get them to sign a signature for you on a form. And now this may seem not too difficult, but if you're a working class folks with family, the math starts to get pretty tricky. This is not something you can pull off on nights and weekends. This needs to be a full-time job for 2 weeks. And even if you do get the required signatures, it's not a guarantee that you're going to be on the ballot. We've got a good patriot down in Zumbrota named Mike Hutchinson. He collected more than 500 signatures to be on the ballot in District 20B as a state representative. However, the state said that they couldn't quite read enough of them well enough, and that the handwriting was not legible, and so they kicked him off the ballot. That's not right. So you either need to go at this alone, collect 500 signatures within a 2-week period, and have the state approve these, or you need to form a party collectively and go through a process of becoming a major political party. And there's 3 ways to do that. The first one is pretty easy. It's just to already be a major political party and have, I think the number is 45 candidates out of 200 be on the ballot. So if you just keep putting candidates forward, you get to retain your status. Second, you can file a petition with the state, but this requires, I believe, 5% of all of the votes cast in the last governor's race, and ends up being hundreds of thousands of signatures across Minnesota, with an archaic process where you can only have 10 per piece of physical paper. 20, 30 thousands of pages, if not more, that all need to be counted in a 1-week process at the Secretary of State. This has never happened before, and I don't think it ever will. The third option is the most easy. What you need to do is you need to have a candidate for one of the 4 statewide races. So that's going to be state auditor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, or the governor. Now, if you can get on that ballot, and for these statewide races, it's going to require 2,000 signatures as opposed to 500 signatures. What you need to do is get to 7% of the vote. And if you do that, whichever party you represent becomes a major party in the next general election. So even though I haven't endorsed a candidate for the Republican primary, I need to let you all know that there's somebody by the name of Jay Reeves, who's running for the Secretary of State for the Forward Independence Party. And he did that with a number of other folks and got the 2,000 signatures. And they're putting kind of, all their effort into that race. And if they're able to get 7%, they will become a major party. And so in the next general election, anybody that wanted to run as a Forward Independence Party member would be able to do so just as you can today for a Republican and a Democrat. So there's 4 artificial constraints that make this a little more difficult. Individually, you've got to collect signatures if you want to be an independent or third party. Or if you want to do this as a large group, you either have to collect much more signatures, already be a party, or win one of these statewide races. So I think some of the things we could do is keep the signatures, but extend that time frame a little bit, just like we already have for a petition to get rid of the filing fee. Give us 12 weeks to collect those signatures over nights and weekends and allow a little more participation. Likewise, we could follow a lot of other things the state's already doing and adopt electronic signatures for this petition process, which would make it easier to collect 200,000 signatures across the state within a year. And finally, we can take that 7% and pull it back down to 5% where it was just a few years ago before Republicans and Democrats got together and said it's too easy for third-party candidates, and they brought it up to 7%. Okay, so now let's say you do make it on the ballot. You're running as an independent and you're on the race. Now you're up against what's arguably the more difficult challenge, and these are the natural structural problems that emerge from our election laws. And as an example, as much as I know folks like independents and third parties and want them to win, history continually shows when push comes to shove, we are going to decide to vote more with our fear of the other person winning than we are of our aspiration for a new third-party candidate. Political scientists call this Duviger's law, and it basically says we're always going to go towards a two-party system, and it's going to get harder and harder over time as long as 2 things are true. 1, whoever gets the most votes right away wins, even if they don't get to 50%. So let's say we have 40% Republican, 35% Democrat, and 25% independent. This means that the Republican has the most, and so they win. Election is over. 2, the other thing that has to be true is we must only elect 1 person for every district. So I'm running for state senator in District 20. When this is all done, there will be 1 state senator representing District 20. Okay, so the bad thing about Duviger's law is this is exactly the situation that we have in Minnesota and across the United States. So we're kind of stuck in this 2-party system. But the good thing is this tells us exactly what we need to do to break free. We need to stop one of these two things. So the first thing we could do is change how we actually elect the person in the race. In the previous example, what you might do is say, if nobody gets the 50%, we're gonna start cutting candidates off and re-voting. And so if it's 40 Republican, 35 Democrat, and 25 Independent, we would actually have a second round of voting where the Independent did not meet the cut, and now you would be back to the Democrat and Republican. And the reason this matters is because if I'm a Republican and I'm afraid of voting for an Independent because I think the Democrats will win, this is now taken away. Because if we all collectively vote for the Independent, it's okay, we've got what we want. But if I split the Republican Party and give a lot of votes to the Independent and let the Republican Party get below the Democratic Party, it still doesn't matter unless the Democratic Party is gonna get over 50%, which they're not. And so then again, we cut out the Independents and it'll be a race with the Republicans and Democrats. And so this is something that frees folks up to be able to vote for third parties without the fear of them basically not getting their second choice. And so there's a number of ways to do this, and a prominent one you might have heard of is called ranked choice voting. So that's built to cut through this first rule. The second thing we could do is elect more than one representative for each district. This is called proportional representation, and it's very common in many other places of the world. And what we would do is instead of having one elected person for each race in each district, we would have more than one. So I like to think of this on a sliding scale, right? So at one end of the spectrum, we've got one candidate that represents us all. And at the other end of the spectrum, we don't even need elections because we have direct democracy and we all vote on all the laws and we all have the ability to put a law forward. Now, there's going to be a lot of logistical challenges of actually making that work. And so that's why we've traditionally always been in some type of a representative democracy. But now let's look at our community. We might have 35% of us that identify as Republicans, 30% that identifies Democrats, 20% that identifies independents, 10% libertarians, 5% Green Party. We have a wide diversity of makeup. And if we were all the way on one spectrum where there was direct democracy, we would indeed have a representation of votes that met that. 35% of the votes would be Republican, 30 would be Democrat, 20 would be independent votes, 10 would be libertarian, 5 would be Green Party. But if we go all the way to one, now it's whoever has the most is always going to be that vote. We're always going to be represented by a single Republican. But we start to play with that number a little bit, move it to 2 people per district. Basically anywhere in the state, we're now going to have still a Republican and a Democrat. You get to 3 people, depending on how you lean, it's probably going to be 2 Republicans and a Democrat. But once you start to get up to 4 or 5 representatives, now all you need is 1/4 or 1/5 of the vote, and now you can have an actual seat at the table. And what I found when running the math is once you get to like 6, 7, and 8 representatives, you really get to show the whole diversity of our opinions, because now anyone with 12.5% of the vote has at least 1 seat at the table. And we would end up likely with 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats, a couple independents, and a libertarian on our ballot. And then we would have the opportunity, when you start pairing that with districts across the state, to have a much more representation, much more coalitions, much more participation, and much more competition that I think will cut through the 2-party rhetoric and actually lead to some better outcomes. And so these are the 2 things we can do. If we want to naturally end the 2-party system, we either need to move to something like ranked choice, which is going to change how we elect the one person that is there and making sure that there's runoff elections if they don't get to 50%, or we're going to need to move towards proportional representation where we have more than one person representing us, so that even if you only have 15, 20, 30% of the vote, you at least have 1 seat at the table and the people that can feel represented by them in their state. And so both of these will get it done. The challenge is not that these are costly measures. The challenge is, is this something that we want? And is this something that we're willing to fight for? And I would support both ranked choice, but also proportional representation, which I think would have a better chance of kind of bringing that competitiveness to the table. So my name is Teddy Kimball, and I'm asking for your vote on August 11th to bring good faith conversations back to the legislature and to start thinking of problems from a top-down and bottom-up perspective instead of purely through a left-right cultural lens. Thank you all. God bless, and go vote on Tuesday, August 11th.